You want me to kill him? That's what you're saying? Keep your voice down. I'm saying the medication will do the work. He takes his heart pills every night. We switch them out, wait a few days, and it looks natural. He's 68 years old, Rachel. Nobody's going to question it. And the house, the accounts, the pension, all of it. He changed the beneficiary last year, remember? Everything goes to that stupid foundation now, unless we get the power of attorney first. That recording played in a courtroom so silent you could hear the air conditioning hum. 47 people sat in those gallery seats, and not one of them breathed. My son, Derek, sat at the defense table with his jaw clenched. His wife, Rachel, had her eyes closed. Like if she couldn't see the room couldn't see her. But it could, and it did. My name is Arthur Whitfield. I spent 41 years as a cardiovascular surgeon at Johns Hopkins, retired 4 years ago after my wife Helen passed. I've held beating hearts in my hands. I've told families their loved ones didn't make it. I've stared down death more times than I can count. But nothing prepared me for the moment. I realized my own son was planning to kill me. Let me go back to where this started. Not the recording, not the courtroom. Back to a Tuesday evening in October, 14 months before the trial, when Derek called me for the first time in 6 weeks. Dad, we're in trouble. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was doing, just those 4 words, flat and hollow, like he'd rehearsed them in the car. What kind of trouble? Financial. Rachel lost her job. The mortgage is 3 months behind. We're looking at foreclosure. I should have asked more questions. Should have pressed him on why Rachel lost her job, the 3rd one in 2 years. Should have asked why they'd taken on a mortgage that size in the first place, on a house in Bethesda that cost more than most people earn in a decade. But he was my son, my only child. And Helen's voice was still in my head, even 2 years after the cancer took her. Take care of our boy, Arthur. Promise me. So I said what any father would say. Come stay with me. Both of you. We'll figure it out. They arrived 3 days later with a moving truck. A moving truck. For what was supposed to be a temporary stay. Rachel walked into my house in Annapolis, the house Helen and I had built together. The house where Derek grew up, and the first thing she said was, "This kitchen needs updating." Not thank you. Not we appreciate this. The kitchen needs updating. I let it go. I let a lot of things go in those first few weeks. The way Rachel rearranged Helen's china cabinet without asking. The way Derek stopped coming to dinner, spending his evenings in the guest room with his laptop, door closed. The way my credit card statement suddenly had charges I didn't recognize. A spa in Georgetown, a designer handbag from Nordstrom, $300 at a wine bar on K Street. I mentioned the charges casually one evening. Derek, there are some items on my Visa I don't recognize. He didn't look up from his phone. Rachel probably used it for groceries. I told her she could. I hadn't told her she could. But I didn't push it. Not then. The first real warning came 5 weeks after they moved in. I'd come home early from my weekly chess game at the Annapolis Senior Center. My opponent, retired Admiral Jim Kendrick, had a doctor's appointment and walked in through the side door, the one that opens into the hallway by my study. I heard voices from the living room, Derek and Rachel, talking in the low, urgent tones of people who don't want to be overheard. I stopped. I'm not proud of that. Eavesdropping in your own home feels wrong, even when your instincts are screaming at you. But 41 years of surgery teaches you to trust your instincts. When something feels off, it usually is. I only caught fragments. Rachel's voice. The will has to be somewhere in this house. And Derek said everything goes to that cardiac research thing now. And Rachel, again, sharper this time. Then we need to change that before he changes anything else. I stood in that hallway for maybe 10 seconds. Then I walked backward, opened the side door again loudly, and called out, "I'm home early!" By the time I reached the living room, they were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. Derek watching basketball. Rachel scrolling her phone. Normal as sunrise. But nothing was normal anymore, and I knew it. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in my study with a glass of scotch and thought about what I'd heard. My wife would have said I was overreacting. Maybe I was. Maybe Rachel was just curious about the will, the way anyone might be. Maybe Derek was just explaining my estate plans, which he had every right to understand. But I kept coming back to one word: change. We need to change that. Not understand. Not discuss. Change. The next morning, I called my attorney, Patricia Moreno. She'd handled Helen's estate and had drawn up my current will, which did indeed leave the bulk of my assets, the house, valued at $2.3 million, my investment portfolio worth roughly $4.7 million, and my pension to the Helen Whitfield Foundation for Cardiac Research. Derek was set to receive $200,000 and some personal items. It was generous by any standard, but I knew it wasn't what he'd expected. Patricia, I need you to do something for me. I need the original will secured in your office safe, not your regular filing system. And I need you to prepare an affidavit confirming its authenticity, dated and notarized. But don't file it anywhere. Just hold it. She was quiet for a moment. Arthur, is something going on? Maybe. Probably. I just want to be prepared. She agreed. That was step one. Step two was harder. I drove to a security company in Baltimore and purchased 4 wireless cameras, the kind that look like smoke detectors. Cost me $1,100. The technician who installed them, a young man named Marcus, asked if I was worried about break-ins. Something like that, I said. I placed them in the living room, the kitchen, my study, and the hallway outside the guest bedroom, all recording to a cloud server with triple redundant backup. Motion activated, night vision, audio. Step 3 was the most difficult, because it required me to lie to my son. I sat Derek down the following weekend, just the two of us, and told him I was thinking about selling the house. It's too big for me, I said. Helen's been gone 2 years. I rattle around in here. I've been talking to a realtor about putting it on the market, maybe downsizing to a condo. Derek's face did something complicated. Surprise, then calculation, then a careful blankness. Where would you go? I haven't decided. Maybe Florida. Maybe one of those retirement communities in Virginia. And the foundation? The money you set aside for Mom's research thing? I shrugged. That's all in the will. Nothing changes there. Right. His jaw tightened. Right. That night, the cameras captured Derek and Rachel in the kitchen at 1:47 a.m. Rachel was pacing. Derek was sitting at the island, drumming his fingers. He's going to sell it. He's going to sell the house and give everything to that foundation, and we'll get nothing. Nothing, Derek. After everything we've done, we haven't done anything yet. Exactly. And if we don't do something soon, we won't have anything to show for it. What do you want me to do, Rachel? She stopped pacing. Looked at him. I want you to grow up and handle this. He's your father. You know his routines. You know his medications. You know his passwords. The way she said medications. Clinical. Deliberate, like she'd been thinking about it for a while. I watched that footage the next morning, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the Annapolis Senior Center, on my phone. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something colder than fear. From the recognition that my son's wife had just suggested, without quite saying it, that they should use my medical vulnerabilities against me. I called Patricia Moreno again. Then I called someone else. Detective Louise Hartwell of the Anne Arundel County Police. Louise and I had known each other for years. I'd operated on her mother's mitral valve in 2014. She listened, without interrupting, as I laid out what I'd seen and heard. Arthur, she said when I'd finished, what you're describing could be interpreted several ways. It's not enough for charges. Not yet. I know. I'm not asking for charges. I'm asking for advice. Her advice was simple and direct. Keep documenting. Don't confront them. And if anything escalates, if they make any move involving your medications, your finances, or your physical safety, call me immediately. I will. And Arthur, be careful. Family cases are the ugliest ones. Over the next 3 months, I watched my son and daughter-in-law methodically plan my destruction. The cameras captured everything. Rachel researching Maryland inheritance laws on her laptop at the kitchen table. Derek going through my study while I was at my chess game, photographing documents, searching drawers. Rachel calling a number I later traced to a paralegal who'd been disbarred for forging court documents. And the credit card charges kept climbing. $4,200 at a jewelry store. $1,800 for a weekend at a resort in the Poconos. $900 on clothes for Rachel from a boutique in Georgetown. They weren't even hiding it anymore. Or maybe they were just confident I was too old, too trusting, too blind to notice. They were wrong about all three. The medication incident happened on a Thursday in January, 4 months after they'd moved in. I'd noticed my heart medication, a beta blocker I'd been taking for 12 years, looked different. The pills were the same shape and color, but the coating had a slightly different texture. Barely noticeable. Most people wouldn't have caught it. But I'd spent 4 decades in cardiology. I knew every heart medication on the market by sight, by feel, by taste. I palmed the pill that night instead of swallowing it. The next day, I drove to a private lab in Baltimore and had it analyzed. The results came back in 48 hours. The pill was not my beta blocker. It was a combination of a blood pressure medication and a mild sedative not immediately lethal, but over time, taken daily by a 68-year-old man with a cardiac history, it would cause progressive heart failure, slow enough to look natural, fast enough to work within months. I sat in that lab parking lot and cried. Not for myself. For the boy Derek had been. For Helen, who would have been devastated. For the absolute, annihilating certainty that my son was trying to kill me. Then I dried my eyes and called Detective Hartwell. The investigation accelerated after that. Louise brought in the state's attorney, a sharp woman named Diana Reeves, who specialized in elder abuse cases. They set up a wiretap on Derek and Rachel's phones. They traced the disbarred paralegal, a man named Vincent Tully, and discovered he'd been paid $15,000 charged to my credit card, naturally to forge a new will naming Derek as sole beneficiary, and a power of attorney giving Rachel control of my finances. Tully rolled on them within 20 minutes of being brought in for questioning, gave up everything. The forged documents, the medication switch, the plan to have me declared mentally incompetent if the pills didn't work fast enough. He even provided text messages from Rachel directing the entire operation. Diana Reeves laid it out for me in her office. The evidence spread across her conference table like a surgical diagram. "We have enough," she said. "Attempted murder, fraud, forgery, elder abuse, identity theft. We can arrest them tonight." "No." She looked at me. "No? Not yet. I have a request." I told her my plan. She listened. Her eyebrows rose. She consulted with the detectives, with the judge who'd authorized the wiretap. They agreed, reluctantly. See, I needed more than criminal charges. I needed Derek to understand, truly understand what he'd done. And for that, I needed him to believe he'd won, at least for a little while. I continued taking the fake pills, actually. I continued pretending to take them, switching them back each night, and taking my real medication from a supply I kept locked in my car. I let my behavior become slightly erratic. Forgot where I put my keys. Repeated stories. Left the stove on twice. Normal aging stuff. Amplified just enough to be convincing. Rachel noticed, of course. She was watching for it. "Arthur seems confused lately," she told Derek one evening. "The camera's capturing every word. I'm worried about him. Maybe we should talk to his doctor." Or, Derek said, and I'll never forget the casualness in his voice, "Maybe we just let it play out. The pills are working. Another month or two and we can get the competency hearing started." Another month or two, my son, discussing my death like it was a renovation timeline. 3 weeks later, I staged a fall, tripped on the stairs, carefully, controlled, the way I'd seen patients describe their symptoms to get admitted. Derek found me at the bottom, sitting on the floor, dazed. "Dad? Dad, are you okay?" I looked up at him with deliberate confusion. "Derek, what are you doing here? This is my house." His face showed concern, but behind the concern, in his eyes, I saw something else. Relief. It was working. The next morning, Rachel called my primary care physician and reported that I'd had a fall and was showing signs of cognitive decline. She requested a competency evaluation. She had no legal authority to do this, of course, but she'd forged the power of attorney, and the doctor's office didn't verify. The evaluation was scheduled for 3 weeks out. That gave me my timeline. I moved quickly. Patricia Moreno filed the affidavit confirming the authenticity of my real will. Detective Hartwell executed search warrants on Vincent Tully's office and recovered the forged documents. Diana Reeves convened a grand jury, and I sat in my house, playing the confused old man, watching Derek and Rachel celebrate quietly in the kitchen every night, believing they were weeks away from controlling everything I'd spent my life building. The arrest happened on a Sunday morning in March. Derek and Rachel were having breakfast. Pancakes. Rachel was making them from scratch, which she'd never done before in 6 months of living in my house, and I remember thinking how strange it was that she'd chosen today to be domestic. I was sitting at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. Derek answered it. 6 officers, Detective Hartwell in front. Derek MacDonald Whitfield? Rachel MacDonald Whitfield? You're under arrest. The look on Derek's face, I'd seen patients wake up from anesthesia and not know where they were. That same blank, groping confusion. He turned to look at me, still sitting at the table with my coffee, and I watched understanding arrive like a slow sunrise. You knew. I took a sip of coffee. I'm a heart surgeon, Derek. I can tell when someone switched my medication by the way the coating feels between my fingers. Rachel didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there in her bathrobe, spatula still in her hand, as the officer read her rights. Pancake batter dripped onto the floor. I remember that detail because it seemed so absurd, this woman who'd orchestrated a plan to kill me, standing in my kitchen, dripping pancake batter, being arrested. The trial lasted 11 days. Diana Reeves prosecuted with the precision of a surgeon. I appreciated that. She built the case piece by piece. The recordings, the surveillance footage, the toxicology report on the switched pills, the forged documents, Vincent Tully's testimony, the phone records, the credit card statements totaling $73,400 in unauthorized charges. Derek's attorney, a man named Philip Gavin, tried everything. He argued I'd entrapped them. He argued the cameras were illegal surveillance. He argued the medication switch was a misunderstanding, that Rachel had simply picked up the wrong prescription. He even brought in a psychologist who testified that Derek was under Rachel's coercive control, that he was essentially a victim too. Diana demolished each argument methodically. The cameras were legal, my house, my right. The medication was tested and proven to be a deliberate substitution, not a pharmacy error. And as for coercive control, Your Honor, she said, the defendant is a 43-year-old man with a graduate degree. He was not locked in a room. He was not threatened. He chose, repeatedly, to participate in a scheme to murder his own father and steal his estate. Calling that coercive control insults every actual victim of domestic coercion. Gavin put Derek on the stand. It was a disaster. Under Diana's cross-examination, Derek contradicted himself 7 times in 40 minutes. He claimed he didn't know about the medication switch, then admitted he'd seen Rachel handling my pill bottles. He said the credit card charges were authorized, then couldn't explain why they'd hidden the statements. He insisted the forged will was Tully's idea, then couldn't explain why his own handwriting was on the instructions Tully had followed. At one point, Diana asked him a question that silenced the entire courtroom. Mr. Whitfield, your father is a retired cardiac surgeon. He spent 41 years saving people's lives. You chose to use his own medical vulnerability, his heart condition, as the weapon to kill him. How long did you think it would take? Gavin objected. Argumentative. Overruled, Judge Patterson said. Answer the question. Derek stared at his hands. Rachel said, 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 months. Diana let the words hang in the air. You were prepared to watch your father deteriorate for 3 to 4 months, eating dinner with him, living in his house, sleeping under his roof, while the pills you'd switched slowly stopped his heart. Derek didn't answer, didn't need to. Every juror's face said what needed to be said. They called me to the stand on day 8. Gavin came at me hard, the way Derek's attorney in the story I'd analyzed had done. Same playbook. Make the victim look like the puppet master. Dr. Whitfield, you installed hidden cameras in your own home to spy on your son and his wife. I installed cameras to document criminal activity, as was my right. You pretended to be confused. You staged a fall. You deliberately let them believe their plan was working. Isn't that entrapment? I looked at him with the same steady gaze I'd used on thousands of terrified patients before surgery. Entrapment is when someone is induced to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise have committed. My son and his wife conceived this plan on their own, executed it on their own, and would have succeeded on their own if I hadn't protected myself. I didn't create their intent. I documented it. But you could have stopped it earlier. You could have confronted them after the first recording, kicked them out of your house, prevented all of this. Yes, I could have. And they would have gone somewhere else, found another victim, perhaps someone without my medical knowledge or my resources, someone who wouldn't have noticed the pills, someone who would have actually died. The courtroom was quiet. Gavin had no follow-up. Diana's closing argument lasted 40 minutes. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence. every recording, every document. Then she said something I'll never forget. Ladies and gentlemen, this case isn't complicated. A father opened his home to his son and daughter-in-law. He gave them shelter, paid their bills, trusted them with access to his life. In return, they tried to slowly poison him. When that wasn't fast enough, they forged documents to steal his estate. They planned his death over pancakes. They discussed his murder like it was a home renovation. They treated his life like an obstacle between them and a bank account. That is not a family dispute. That is attempted murder. And it deserves to be punished as such. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I spent those hours at the Annapolis Senior Center playing chess with Admiral Kendrick. He knew about the trial, everyone did, but he didn't bring it up. Just played chess. 3 games. I won 2, he won 1. The verdict came at 4:47 p.m. Guilty. Every count. Both defendants. Attempted murder, fraud, forgery, elder abuse, identity theft. Rachel made a sound when the foreman read her verdict, a high, thin, keen, like an animal in a trap. Derek just sat there, didn't move, didn't speak, stared at the table in front of him like it held answers. Sentencing was 2 weeks later. Gavin argued for leniency. Diana argued for maximum penalties. Judge Patterson listened to both, then delivered his ruling. Derek Whitfield, 22 years. Rachel Whitfield, 25 years. Joint restitution of $847,000, representing stolen funds, emotional distress damages, and legal fees. 25 for Rachel. More than Derek. The judge explained his reasoning. Rachel had conceived the plan, directed its execution, and shown the most premeditation. She was the architect. Derek was the willing instrument. I thought about the comment analysis I'd read. The audience wanted the manipulator punished most. Judge Patterson apparently agreed. After the sentencing, I did something I'd planned but hadn't been sure I'd go through with. I walked to where Derek stood with his guards, waiting to be transported back to the detention center. He looked at me. His eyes were red. His face was 10 years older than it had been a year ago. I spoke quietly, so only he could hear. Your mother's last words to me were about you. She made me promise to take care of you. I kept that promise, Derek. I took you into my home. I would have given you anything you asked for. All you had to do was ask. He opened his mouth, closed it. You could have come to me and said, Dad, I'm struggling. I'm scared. I need more help. And I would have moved mountains for you. But you didn't ask. You took. You schemed. You tried to kill the man who gave you life, who held your mother's hand when she died, who would have given you everything if you'd just had the patience and the decency to wait. His eyes filled. Dad, you didn't just break the law, Derek. You broke something that can't be fixed with time served or restitution. You broke the promise your mother asked me to keep. And that is what I will never forgive. I turned and walked away. Didn't look back. Couldn't. The house sold in April for $2.4 million. I donated every cent. $800,000 to the Helen Whitfield Foundation. $800,000 to a legal defense fund for elderly victims of family financial abuse. The remaining $800,000 to Johns Hopkins to endow a fellowship in Helen's name. I moved to a cottage in Easton, on Maryland's eastern shore. 2 bedrooms, a screened porch, a view of the Tread Avon River. Cost me $420,000. I furnished it simply a reading chair, a good desk, bookshelves, a chess table by the window. Admiral Kendrick drives over from Annapolis every Wednesday for our game. We play for 3 hours, drink coffee, sometimes talk about the trial, mostly don't. Last Wednesday, he just lost his queen to my bishop and was studying the board with that intense focus submarine commanders never quite lose. You know what gets me, he said. You saw it coming. Months before they made their move, you saw it. I'm a surgeon, Jem. I spent 41 years reading the signs no one else could see. The slight irregularity in a heartbeat, the shadow on a scan that doesn't belong, the moment when something that looks healthy is actually dying from the inside. He looked up from the board. And your son? I moved my rook into position. My son was a shadow on a scan I didn't want to read, but I read it anyway. He nodded. Made his move. I made mine. Checkmate in 3. I sit on my porch most evenings now, watching the river turn gold in the sunset. The cottage is quiet. Not lonely quiet, peaceful quiet. The difference matters. Helen's photo sits on the mantle, the one from our trip to Italy in 2008, and sometimes I talk to her. Tell her about my day, about the chess games, about the garden I'm attempting badly to grow. I don't tell her about Derek. She wouldn't want to know. And some truths are better left unspoken, even to the dead. Last month, I received a letter from the Maryland Department of Corrections. Derek had requested to be added to my visitor list. I looked at the form for a long time. Then I put it back in the envelope, wrote return to sender on the front, and drove it to the post office. Maybe someday, maybe in 22 years, when he walks out of those gates older than I am now, maybe then we'll have something to say to each other. Or maybe we won't. Maybe the damage is too complete, too thorough, too deliberate to ever repair. I don't know. And for the first time in my life, I'm at peace with not knowing. Diana Reeves called last week. She's writing an article for the Maryland Bar Journal about elder financial abuse. Wants to use my case as a case study. You know what's been bothering me, Arthur? She said. You had every right to confront them early. Throw them out. Why didn't you? Because I needed them to show who they really were. Not who I suspected they were. Not who I feared they were. Who they really were with evidence no jury could dismiss and no attorney could explain away. And if you'd been wrong, if they hadn't been planning what you thought they were planning, then I'd have been a paranoid old man with an expensive security system and an intact family. I'd have taken that trade gladly. She was quiet for a moment. But you weren't wrong. No, I wasn't. I think about that sometimes. What if I had been wrong? What if the conversation I'd overheard had been innocent? What if the pills really had been a pharmacy mix-up? What if my son and his wife were just struggling, not scheming? I would have dismantled my cameras, hugged my son, and apologized for doubting him. Would have been the happiest moment of my life. But that's not the world I live in. In the world I live in, my son tried to kill me for money, and I stopped him. Not with anger, not with violence, with patience and preparation and the same methodical precision that guided my hands through thousands of surgeries. Helen used to say I was the most patient man she'd ever met. You'd have to be, she said, to spend 8 hours reconstructing a heart valve the size of a quarter. She was right. Patience was my greatest surgical skill. Turns out it was my greatest survival skill, too. The chess table by my window catches the morning light. I play online most days, against opponents from around the world who don't know my name or my story. They just know my rating, which has climbed steadily since I retired from surgery and started playing seriously. Last Tuesday, I beat a Grandmaster candidate from Street, Petersburg, in 53 moves. A positional game, slow and strategic, the kind where you don't realize you've lost until it's already over. After the game, I typed a message in the chat. Patience wins, every time. He replied, well played. You think like a surgeon. I smiled at that, closed the laptop, poured my coffee, and sat on my porch, watching the river, listening to the birds, living the quiet life my son tried to take from me. He failed. I didn't. And that, I suppose, is the only verdict that truly matters.